The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
In what is very quickly becoming one of the major stories of 2016, former producer Lewis will be calling into the bonus show today. I'm sorry, no, that's true. But the actual big story is that we have now learned, according to a number of American intelligence agencies, adding to the story from earlier this week, that Russian President Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent, was personally involved in the Russian hacking meant to hurt Hillary Clinton in her campaign against Donald Trump. Russian involvement in the election of Donald Trump has become now a fundamental turning point, I would argue, in terms of the concept of sovereign American elections. U.S. intelligence officials have a, quote, high level of confidence that Putin was personally involved in the hacking that took place. Two senior U.S. officials with direct access to the information say that the new intelligence shows that Putin was personally directing how the hacked material should be leaked and how the hacked material should be used. And this comes from diplomatic sources and spies working for American allies, according to American officials. And here's the most revealing part. This seems to have started not because Vladimir Putin wanted Donald Trump to win per se, but because of Vladimir Putin's so-called vendetta against Hillary Clinton. And then it reportedly turned into an effort to just more generally show how corrupt American politics is and, quote, split off key American allies by creating the image that other countries couldn't depend on the U.S. to be a credible global leader anymore. It succeeded. Congratulations to Vladimir Putin, who Mitt Romney said in 2012, Russia and Putin, the greatest geopolitical foe of the United States. As we've been talking about for a long time now, we talked, Pat, about who is going to be the leader of the free world when President Trump is president of the U.S. It's not going to be Trump, and Russia has successfully undermined the idea of the U.S. as a credible global leader with Donald Trump. They succeed.
Yeah.
Excuse me, they succeeded.
Who thought that Mitt Romney would be right on that point, that Russia would be the greatest geopolitical threat? And it turns out that the election of Donald Trump has verified that.
Ultimately, the CIA did say by the end of this little project for Vladimir Putin, they did proactively want to elect Trump, but that's not how it started. It started just as hurting Hillary. And we now know this goes way further than intelligence suggested back in October. The U.S. with solid information tying Putin to the operation. This is major. This is one of the most successful campaigns that we have ever seen in the history of the United States to meddle in American elections by a foreign power. Now, first of all, at a sort of micro level, do Trump supporters realize how embarrassing it is that their guy is a puppet that was helped by a foreign power called our greatest geopolitical foe just 4 years ago? One of my cousins made a good point about this on Facebook, saying, you know, the U.S. has actually been interfering with elections in other parts of the world for a very long time. Not that many people in the U.S. cared that we were influencing other countries' elections. So maybe they won't care that another country influenced ours. I don't know.
Well, there's this interesting Republican talking point going around now that no voter was actually influenced by what the Kremlin had to say and what Russia wanted to be the outcome of the election. Yeah. But you have to go a step further than that. It's what they hacked that would give a false impression of Hillary Clinton and cause them to change their mind and vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, on Twitter, I've got all these Trumpists saying, David, I voted for Trump and it had nothing to do with what Putin said. This isn't about what Putin said, right? Trump won by 58,000 votes across 3 key states, while losing hugely in the popular vote. And it's abundantly clear that were it not for this coordinated smear campaign by the president of Russia, a lifelong KGB agent, that Donald Trump would be very unlikely to have won that election. And conservatives talk about American sovereignty. Even if the guy that bamboozled you into voting for him won, and you like that, He won in part because of another country's operations for their own fun and games, and American sovereignty over our own elections has been completely compromised. This will be written about in history books. This is historic. Vladimir Putin's involvement here to get a clueless reality show buffoon elected who is now appointing Russia-friendly business buddies to run the country and will be getting to decide on Supreme Court justices. Putin and his buddies are probably laughing hysterically every day, aren't they, Pat? I mean, they must just be yucking it up over there.
Yeah, they're very happy with the outcome, so it seems.
They got a country of around 325 million people to elect an authoritarian strongman who has no idea what he's doing. And Vladimir Putin, we know, has wanted to be seen as a powerful force in the world. And I think that he has achieved that here. Russian hacking has changed the direction of the United States. And I want to go further for a second. I don't believe for a second that Donald Trump didn't know about this. I'm not saying that Donald Trump was coordinating with Russia, but we can't really believe, Pat, that Paul Manafort working for Trump, direct connections to the Kremlin, prior attempts at business dealings with Russia, Trump connections to Russian billionaires, etc. It's very hard for me to believe that Trump was completely in the dark about what Russia was doing.
And now you can even take a look at his cabinet picks because his choice for Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has a long history with dealing with Vladimir Putin.
Another storyline here is all of a sudden Republicans don't think Russia's that bad, right? Nothing material has changed since in 2012, Romney said, Russia's our biggest geopolitical foe. Republicans didn't really argue against that then. Nothing has materially changed, except for the fact that now we have that country that was our greatest geopolitical foe having acted to help Donald Trump win. Remember when Trump during the campaign said the world is laughing at us? Turns out he was right, but it has nothing at all to do with President Obama. Scientists are frantically copying climate data, fearing that it might be deleted or made to disappear under President Donald Trump. They are so afraid, are these scientists, that decades of data that they've been working on could be eliminated under a Donald Trump administration, that they've established independent servers where they can copy off tons of government data to try to protect it from potential political interference. This includes an effort of guerrilla archiving in Toronto. This includes meetings at the University of Pennsylvania to figure out how to download as much federal data as possible. This includes scientists and database experts that are collaborating to figure out how to create a sort of safe harbor for scientific information. And why is this happening? Well, it's happening because President-elect Donald Trump has nominated this ever-growing list of cabinet members who have questioned the scientific consensus on global warming. The transition team at the Department of Energy has demanded the names of agency officials who were involved in international climate talks to work on what we know to be the scientific basis for Obama administration regulations of carbon emissions. They want names, Pat, and I understand the fear.
Yeah, I don't think they're being paranoid at all. If you look at Trump's position on climate change and his more authoritarian tendencies, like cracking down on a free flow of information.
One Trump advisor suggested that NASA should not be allowed to conduct climate research anymore because it's become too political. And of course, Trump himself has called human-caused climate change a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese for the benefit of the Chinese economy. And Pat said he doesn't think it's paranoia. Is it paranoia or preparedness? The scientists involved are saying, no, this is preparedness. This is one of the major issues of our time, climate change and what we're doing to our planet. And according to a Sierra Club report, when Trump assumes the presidency on January 20th, he will be the only head of state in the world to deny what we know as mainstream consensus climate science. And that includes Kim Jong-un of North Korea. North Korea is more science-based than Trump on the issue of climate change.
And look at the wide coalition of world leaders who got together to sign the Paris Climate Accord. And now Trump has even threatened to pull out of that.
There's precedent for the fear that scientists have, though, because Stephen Harper did something similar in Canada, where he attempted to silence climate scientists. And in a few cases, some data sets were taken offline altogether. And forget for a second about the issue of climate change specifically. If we ever have a president deleting data from research that doesn't agree with the position of their administration, We've got far bigger problems on our hands. And, what if they appoint cabinet members ideologically opposed to the departments that they head? That would be really bad also. Oh, wait a second. Rick Perry to the Department of Energy, who doesn't think that we should have a Department of Energy. Scott Pruitt to the Environmental Protection Agency, a guy whose career has been based on the opposite of protecting the environment. That's a big problem. We are really, really in for it. You're going to like this video. This is what I'm calling the Trump clown of the day. Now, during the presidential campaign, the Trump clown of the day was very often one of Trump's spokespeople, Katrina Pearson, for example, and Healy Baumgardner. Now it's a whole new cast of deplorable characters, not the least of which is a gentleman named Anthony Scaramucci, a member of Donald Trump's presidential transition team. He's an advisor to Trump. He went on CNN. He was being interviewed by Chris Cuomo. And there's basically two headlines from this video. One is getting a lot of attention and one is not. The first one is that Scaramucci compared believing climate science to believing that the earth is flat hundreds of years ago. That doesn't make any sense. Later, he casually referenced the age of the earth as 5,500 years, okay? And that's making fewer headlines, and I want to talk about that as well. So let's start with this stunning and wholesale lack of understanding of anything. These are the types of deplorables that are going to be making important decisions for the next 4 years. Bear that in mind.
I think, look, I mean, I know that the current president believes that the human beings are affecting the climate. There are scientists that believe that that's not happening. I think that,
overwhelming consensus in the scientific community is that man's actions have an impact on science. No, you have to correct that whenever it comes out. Go ahead.
Chris, there was an overwhelming science that the earth was flat, and there was an overwhelming science
that you learn over time.
We were the center of the world. 100%. We get a lot of things wrong in the scientific community. You and I both know that. I'm not suggesting that we're not affecting the. I honestly don't know. I'm not a scientist. If you're asking me for my opinion, it's probably a blend of people and what's going on in the you're not asking me for my opinion.
I hate that he got interrupted there because he was about to say something about what's going on in the astronomical something or other. It was about to get even better. But he gets to the key thing at the end, Pat, which is I'm not a scientist. So then why are you talking about why you think the scientists are wrong if you're not a scientist?
That's exactly why I liked that he got interrupted, because Chris Cuomo had to step in there and say, I don't really care what your opinion is. It's fact no matter what you believe.
It's not Chris Cuomo's opinion either. He's just saying, here's what the scientists say. And what is this guy talking about? There was a, quote, overwhelming science that the earth was flat. First of all, there's no comparison between flat earthers and climate science in 2016. Flat earthers were not operating on the scientific method that we have today. They were people like, for example, Greek philosophers, mostly pre-Socrates in the 6th to 5th century BC. Aristotle provided evidence for the spherical shape of the earth on empirical grounds by around 330 BC. And where Scaramucci is particularly wrong is that the most modern flat earther stuff was not science getting it wrong. It was religion holding on to non-science. He gets it opposite.
Yeah, and the consequences of being wrong about something like geocentrism are pretty small. The consequences of him being wrong on the climate, that's drastic.
Especially the consequences of being wrong about geocentrism or flat Earth when we don't even have the ability to send up a satellite or get off the planet at all. The consequences are essentially zero compared to what we're talking about with climate change.
And there are still people who believe in those theories.
There are a few. Yeah. There are a few. Yeah, they're harder and harder to find, fortunately. Now, here's where it gets insane. I want to prepare. I would get the kids out of the room for this. Here, Scaramucci says that science has been wrong during the long 5,500 years that the planet Earth has existed. When I saw this, I couldn't stop laughing.
So does President-elect Trump, and so do I, Chris.
I just want you to understand, it's not ideological for me. I'm just stating to you what the proposition is from the scientific community.
But it isn't for me either.
But you don't science. Let me just move on to something else, though, which is...
I didn't say that. I said I'm not.
You said you don't know, and I'm saying the scientific community does.
I don't. But you're saying that you do, and you're saying the scientific community knows, and I'm saying people have gotten things wrong throughout the 5,500-year history of our planet.
I think you have to distinguish
the 5,500-year history of our planet. Check, please. I'm out the door. The Earth is, of course, at our best estimation, 4.543 billion years old. Now, that may not be exact, but saying, well, it might be 4.5 billion, it might be 5,500 is like saying humans don't need air to live. That is the point at which there is a disconnect from the real world here. The 5,500-year-old Earth thing seemed to sort of go over Chris Cuomo's head. Maybe he needed to move on or something like that. That's the headline from this.
To his credit, he did say human history, but even that goes back millions of years.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're talking about, several hundred years of modern humans, and then early humans, we're talking about several million years. But of course, that even a fraction of the time that we're talking about the age of the Earth, 4.5 billion years old. There is someone advising Donald Trump who believes that our planet is 5,500 years old. That should scare anybody who can even put together a coherent thought. Send me your thoughts about this on Twitter at @DPakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Bruce Tassin. Bruce, thank you so much for being a member of the David Pakman Show. This is your show in the sense that we're mostly funded by you, our listeners, our viewers on YouTube, radio, podcast, television, etc. Please sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. And this is not to try to get every last dollar we can out of our audience. If the prices are too high, by all means, take 40% off with the coupon code IVoted17. I want you involved, but I want you involved at a level that makes sense for you financially. So if the normal prices are high, IVoted17, all one word, all lowercase. Use it and get a discount. Really, really appreciate it. Let's talk about what's going on our Reddit discussion forum. Always like to check in there and see what's happening. davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. Now more than 2,100 of our viewers regularly discussing politics there. Two popular topics, me taking off my shirt and whether I trust the CIA, came up on the Reddit discussion forum over the last week. Let's take a look at a few of the stories, starting with anti-Trump elector Chris Saproon paid for Ashley Madison while bankrupt and married with 3 kids. This is a story that surfaced to try to smear this Republican Trump elector who announced he wouldn't be voting Trump. And my response was, what difference does it make? What difference does it make whether Christopher Saproon was cheating if he feels that he should not be voting for Donald Trump, which is something he can decide as an elector? Another discussion from our Reddit discussion forum. Why is David Pakman trusting the CIA all of a sudden? They were, after all, very wrong about Iraq. Listen, I've made it very clear that that is a false talking point, okay? We have a situation where the George W. Bush administration misused the intelligence from the CIA. The CIA never actually said, hey, we've got all this stuff that we know for sure Saddam has. That is a false talking point from the right, and you should be aware of it. Another discussion from Reddit at davidpakman.com/Reddit. Trump's Secretary of State favorite Rex Tillerson praised the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yeah, a few people have emailed me about this saying, David, now that TPP is dead, supposedly, Tillerson is a guy who liked it. That may well be true. I don't know that Tillerson praising TPP in the past means it's going to be revived under Trump, but we will see. Next discussion from our Reddit discussion forum. Ideas to spice up the fundraiser. This was an interesting post with some ideas for what we might be able to do on the fundraiser. Of course, mentioned in there is that, quote, a lot of people seem to want David to take his shirt off, so there is that. Also, a lot of people really want to see Lewis. Well, I'll say 2 things about that. Number one, I don't know that a lot of people want to see me take my shirt off. I've heard it from 2 people so far, one via voicemail and one on Reddit. And that may actually be the same person. And number 2, as far as Lewis will be on today's bonus show. He is on his exploratory trip to the southeast of the United States, hoping to find a new place to live. And we're going to be hearing from producer Lewis today.
Just to connect those 2 points, is it true that producer Lewis once took his shirt off on the show?
I think it is. Yeah. I don't know that it was that he took his shirt off, but I think he had on a hoodie and a T-shirt under it, and he wanted to show the T-shirt, or maybe it was to show his tattoos. And in the process of taking off maybe just the hoodie, he exposed a significant portion of his entire torso. And I know that memberships exploded that day. The only day that we've done better on memberships than that day was the day after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. So clearly it was a big, big deal. Okay, I think we have one or two more, do we? One more. One more story. Somebody posted some hilarious Photoshops of Donald Trump as the Queen of England with the full hat and everything. You have to see these. These are very, very visual. These are really good, aren't they, Pat? I mean, these are fantastic pictures.
Yeah, have you ever seen Clump, a combination of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton together?
I have
seen one face. That's fantastic.
It's the stuff of nightmares. I mean, it's a very, very scary. So anyway, all of these discussions and more happening at davidpakman.com/Reddit. I'm on there regularly. I see Pat mixing it up in the discussion forum as well. So check it out, sign up, and it's all going to be very, very exciting and continuing there. Okay, let's update you on the Indiegogo fundraiser at davidpakman.com/donate, which we are running to really expand not only the David Pakman Show, but progressive activism at large. We have a new high watermark for the top donation to our Indiegogo campaign. Before yesterday, $299 was the top donation. We actually had two $299 donations. We now have a new leader that has emerged. His name is Joshua, and he came in with a $499 donation. Absolutely huge, huge thank you to Joshua. The $499 perk happens to be 10 discounted one-year memberships. So now Joshua has these 10 memberships to give away to people. And Joshua is really a mensch because he has redonated the 10 memberships back to the show to give away at some point in the future. That's huge, Pat. I mean, Joshua is an all-star right now.
We're going to have to come up with some way to give out those memberships.
We are going to, and there will be plenty of time for that, I assure you. Also, donations as small as $1, 3 $1 donations, 6 $2 donations, 4 $3 donations. It all matters. Even if you think you shouldn't contribute because you can't contribute much, that is not the right way to think about it. If everybody who can donate even just $1, $2, or $3 at davidpakman.com/donate does it, then this campaign will be over before you know it. So please, if you can donate more than $4.99, help to set a new high mark for a single donation for the campaign. But most importantly, help us to continue to grow the number of donors. It's currently at 184 donors. Let's get to 250. That's the next target for me. And real quick, 2 new perks that are available only through the David Pakman Show fundraiser are custom designed t-shirts. The first of which I'm showing you on screen is the established in 2005 t-shirt. We've determined that at the show's inception in 2005, producer Pat was just 2 years old. And 11. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. Okay. This is an exclusive t-shirt only available at davidpakman.com/donate. And for the first time ever, we have a Hatriot Mail t-shirt. We've taken one of the dozen or so Hatriot Mail graphics that we used during Hatriot Mail and turned it into a t-shirt. Talk about a conversation piece. Again, the Hatriot Mail t-shirt and the established in 2005 t-shirt, both only available at davidpakman.com/donate. Donald Trump said that he would appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. You probably have heard that story before. That is probably not news to you. Now, during that time, Donald Trump helped to popularize the chant, "Lock her up." However, we recently heard from Donald Trump that that was just election BS. It was something that plays well during the campaign, but that we don't care about it now. In other words, what Trump meant was, it's something I said to get people excited and to vote for me, but I never really planned to do it. Now, a lot of this email thing also extended to Trump's incoming cabinet members and advisors, and this includes none other than retired Army General Michael Flynn. He condemned Hillary Clinton's, quote, careless use of a private email server and said that there was, quote, nothing wrong with the lock her up chant. Let me put up a quote for you from Michael Flynn. We're saying that because if I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today. So crooked Hillary Clinton, leave this race now. Well, sometimes irony is sweet. In some cases, it's not, because this guy is still going to be national security advisor. It turns out that Michael Flynn did do a tenth of what Hillary Clinton actually did. Flynn himself inappropriately shared classified information with foreign military officers and officials in Afghanistan in 2010, as the Washington Post reported just 48 hours ago. Flynn wasn't authorized to share the classified information. He was not authorized to share the particular secrets that he divulged. Now, Flynn was asked about this, and he said, this is insignificant. This is nothing that we need to worry about. Yet there are numerous former U.S. officials that are familiar with exactly what Flynn did, which say that, he is accused of telling allies about the activities of other agencies in Afghanistan, including the CIA. This is very serious, but it gets even more interesting, Pat. Remember the Clinton private email server situation? Dana Priest wrote a profile of Flynn in the New Yorker and reported that Flynn, quote, had technicians secretly install an internet connection in his Pentagon office, even though it was forbidden. Well, lock them up, right, Pat? But you see, servers are more likely to be hacked at home than, at my office because, Hillary was a crook or something like that.
Yeah, it's a total double standard. And also, you remember General David Petraeus shared very highly classified information.
Oh, yeah.
Not for the interest of the public, but just to show it off to his biographer and his lover.
Indeed.
And then Petraeus was considered for a long time for Secretary of State.
Someone should alert Jason Chaffetz, because I'm sure, just like he started up a congressional investigation into Hillary's email scandal, he'll start one into Michael Flynn right away, right? I mean, we know he takes this type of thing very, very seriously. Oh, wait, no, it was all a partisan witch hunt from the beginning. Imagine if Michael Flynn, as part of the Trump administration, exposed, for example, classified information to one of our adversaries, like, I don't know, Russia or something. Wait, is Russia an adversary now, or are they someone that half of Trump's cabinet is friendly with and would love to do business with? I don't know. It's changed so quickly since Mitt Romney called Russia our greatest geopolitical foe in 2012 that it's hard for me to know whether Russia's even bad right now.
Yeah, I can't really answer that question for you.
Yeah. This is a very, very hot topic on our Reddit discussion forum, davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. You can discuss this story or any others from today's show there.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined by attorney Mike Papantonio, co-host of Ring of Fire Radio, and also the host of America's Lawyer on RT, which premiered last night. For people who don't know the concept here, Pap, because it's a really different concept for a program, what is it that people will see on the show?
Well, there's so many stories that corporate media, their advertisers will not, they order them, don't tell these stories, basically. If it's a pharmaceutical that's killing people, in Pfizer's one of their advertisers, or Merck is one of the advertisers, say NBC, CBS, ABC, basically they get the order, don't tell the story if it's going to hurt sales. So you really can't tell stories that matter to consumers. If it's Wall Street who's stealing from mom and pop investors, it's tough to tell that story because Goldman Sachs and Morgan, all of the big folks on Wall Street are advertising through corporate media. Same way with environmental cases. If DuPont, for example, is destroying an entire ecosystem, you really can't tell that story if you're on corporate media because the advertisers won't let you. And I've had first-hand experience with that. I mean, where I was told, we tried to tell a story about something called yellow wood, that we were talking about the fact that it contained arsenic, and we were shut down immediately on MSNBC.
Yeah, talk about that, because you were at the time a fairly regular guest on MSNBC, weren't you? And then you went on and you started telling the story, and all of a sudden, was it a year or more that you just did not get invited back?
I think it might have been a couple of years, yeah. But then I was doing, in between there, I was doing Fox News during the time I was a liberal on Fox. Yeah, but I told the story about something that was called yellow wood, and it was where they were using this wood that we alleged and I think showed clearly had content of arsenic in it. But unfortunately, they were using the wood for children's playgrounds. And that kind of wood is fine if you're building a foundation for a house that, you know, you don't want the wood to rot, or if you're building a pier that reaches out into a waterway. That's good. It actually works for that. But the point is, you don't use that for children's playgrounds. And so we did a segment, Joe Scarborough and I did a segment, and the next day I got a call from Phil Griffin, who's I didn't. Joe got the call from Phil Griffin saying, what's up here? And it was almost as if we had to go back on and do a recant the story, which I refused to do. And so that's pretty typical of what you run into with corporate media. It's all about money. They have no responsibility to really telling investigative stories. I mean, just look at the tobacco problem, where you had 60 Minutes that even hedged on telling the story about tobacco and the dangers of how it causes cancer. And that's even after the CEOs for 12 different companies raised their right hand and committed perjury in front of Congress, lied to Congress about the dangers. But still, you cannot get corporate media to tell these stories anymore.
Oftentimes, when you tell somebody about a legal show, they imagine, you know, a panel of 4 people yelling about whether someone is guilty or not guilty of some depraved crime against kids or something like that. America's Lawyer is a totally different type of legal show. I mean, you're talking about specific corporations, and you're talking about some of the cases that attorneys are involved in. Can you give us a couple of examples of what we can expect?
For example, the first show we talked about Johnson & Johnson's talc powder, where we actually showed the documents that came from their file cabinets that showed that they absolutely knew of the dangers of ovarian cancer relating to talc powder. So we don't just, I begin the show, David, with a short opening statement, about 6 or 7 minutes, but in there I'm actually showing the documents that I'm relying on. I'm not asking anybody to take my word for anything. We actually show them the documents, and then we move right into the lawyer who might be handling it, and they talk more about the documents and what's showing up in court. So we started off with that case. We started off with Aaron Brockovich on the Flint, Michigan cover-up. And we focused on the idea that you had Rick Snyder up there that was covering up the dangers of this water that children were drinking by the gallons for a year, and the amount of lead that was contained in it, why it was covered up, how it was covered up. And Aaron Brockovich handled that issue. So it's kind of gloves. It's totally gloves off, David. There's nothing warm and fuzzy about what we do. We go after the other side, and then we end the story. We end the show talking about the good, the positive stories that are out there, where there's been great developments in the law on behalf of consumers. And again, consumers simply don't have the chance to hear those stories either.
How is your legal community, given the types of cases that you work on and try, preparing for the incoming Trump administration? And by that, I mean, you know, for example, the Dakota Access Pipeline, which both Donald Trump and incoming Secretary of Energy Rick Perry have financial connections to. Scott Pruitt at the EPA, a guy charged with environmental protection who has a multi-decade record of doing the exact opposite. I mean, do you think that there are implications in terms of the work that you do from the incoming cabinet?
Well, it's just going to create a lot of work. I mean, we've been through this before. For example, after the Bush administration, we started seeing more pharmaceutical cases where dangerous drugs were killing people literally by the thousands, whether it was a birth control pill that was causing blood clots, or excuse me, that was causing strokes in women, whether it was an anticoagulant drug that was supposed to be used to avoid blood clots, that was causing death in people by just bleeding out. So we saw a lot of that come out of the Bush administration, and oddly enough, Clinton as well, because there was such an effort to deregulate. The FDA was basically neutered in their ability to be able to do anything, and they voluntarily participated with the pharmaceutical industry because they were getting jobs. You see, FDA would get a job, they would move through the process, and they would say, yeah, we're going to allow this drug to go on the market. Next thing you know, that person is working with the drug company. So we're going to see the same thing, and it's going to be the younger lawyers of 5, 6, 7 years from now that have to clean up this mess again. In the meantime, we're going to go to court every time we have to slow everything down as much as possible.
As far as America's Lawyer is concerned, you know, any time that there's a program that starts, a savvy media consumer would say, okay, well, let's explore what conflicts of interest could arise based on the advertisers on that program. That's going to be very specifically not an issue with America's Lawyer, isn't it?
No, that's one reason. Obviously, I agreed to do this. I mean, there is no conflict of interest at all. I mean, we're not, you know, obviously some of the cases that we're talking about, we're going to be involved with because we've been doing this for 35 years. And we will have tried some of those cases, but you don't have to take our word for it. We'll have people besides me talking about the case. And as far as advertising, they don't really advertise. They have the same advantage that BBC had, or where they're able to tell a story without having an advertiser make a telephone call saying you have to take that story down because it's going to affect sales. It's really odd. Right now, you're in the midst of, you know, you've got the Democrats primarily beating on Russia for hacking. At this point, I think you'd conclude the same thing I have. There's all this innuendo, anonymous this, anonymous that. So far, I've seen no proof of anything. But nevertheless, it's a good talking point for the Democrats who feel like they have to blame the failure of the election on the FBI, Comey, on Bernie Sanders, on WikiLeaks, on Russians, on progressive media, on misogynists, on millennials, on fake news. I mean, we've seen it all. And
yeah,
so,
I think I think I agree with you in terms of, you know, there's plenty of blame here that should be inward looking. At the same time, you know, I've disagreed with the right-wing idea that, hey, the CIA was wrong on Iraq and we can't trust them now either on this Russia thing, because it's sort of a false notion. The Bush administration misused what the CIA had actually said. So that talking point specifically, I think, is one that's being really misused by the right to discredit the CIA unfairly. I don't know what you think of that.
Well, my response is the CIA is not a moot bunch of morons. I mean, they had the right to speak up. They didn't speak up, even after Powell and Rice showed up in front of the UN with this fraud game that they played about yellow cake uranium. They knew the lie. Yeah. And they chose to keep their mouths shut, and thousands, tens and tens of thousands of people died because of it. I have very little respect for the CIA, very little. And I'm not equating this with it, but you know, it's just not people like me that are doubting the CIA. It's the FBI doubting the CIA. It's an organization that runs all of the security entities that say we're not buying into this Russian hacking. So we have to see more. I mean, and I think it makes me angry. The anger is to see the Democrats using this as some type of prop as far as why Hillary failed. It's incensing to me. Yep,
I agree with you. I mean, the bottom line is, even if all of the allegations are true, if you didn't have such a candidate with this level of baggage, 58,000 votes in 3 states would not have swung the election to begin with. That's sort of where I end up on it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Not only that, but it's kind of a misdirection, David. We see it in court all the time where the defense lawyer, we present these horrible documents, and the defense to the case is, well, yeah, these documents are bad, but let's talk about where Papantonio got those documents, as if that matters. You see, the emails were horrible. And so rather than addressing that, they want to blame it on somebody else. And to me, it's just insane. And unfortunately, rank and file Democrats are buying into it, and it's making them look foolish.
America's Lawyer premiered on RT last night. We've been speaking with the show's host, attorney Mike Papantonio. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I told you earlier this week about Donald Trump explaining why he doesn't need daily intelligence briefings because he's, quote, smart. He's, quote, like a smart person. And well, first, before I tell you the latest news, which involves former CIA Director Leon Panetta, I'll remind you what he said to Chris Wallace over the weekend.
You are getting the presidential daily brief only once a week.
Well, I get it when I need it.
But is there some skepticism?
First of all, these are very good people that are giving me the briefings. And I say, if something should change from this point, immediately call me. I'm available on 1 minute's notice.
Yeah.
I don't have to be told, I'm like a smart person. I don't have to be told the same thing and the same words every single day for the next 8 years.
A bunch of people wrote in, Pat, after we ran this story, and they said, Trump said he's like a smart person. He didn't say he is a smart person, which is just sort of a linguistic convention. He said, I'm like a smart person, but literally interpreted, he said, I'm similar to a smart person, but not exactly saying he is a smart person.
And I think that's more of a correct assessment than just saying he is a smart person.
I think you're right. And it seems that if we asked former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta whether anything Trump said there makes any sense, the answer would be no. He was asked about this issue in as per Reuters, and he said the following about Trump taking the daily briefing only once per week. I've seen presidents who have asked questions about whether that intelligence is verifiable. What are the sources for that intelligence? But I have never seen a president who said, I don't want that stuff. If we endure another attack and the intelligence officials had indications or information regarding that attack, and the president did not want to listen to that for whatever reason, the responsibility for that attack would fall on the president. Leon Panetta is completely right. If Trump makes it a habit of not taking the daily intelligence briefing, and there is an attack against the United States, it would be perfectly reasonable to hold Trump at least partially responsible. But don't delude yourselves, rational thinkers. We know who's going to be blamed for any attack during Donald Trump's administration. I'll give you one guess, Pat. I'm sure you can get it right. Who would be blamed if an attack happens during the Trump administration?
Hillary Clinton?
No, Barack Obama. But close. That would have been the second option, and it's a good assessment as well. Anything that happens during the Trump administration is going to be blamed on the conditions left behind for Donald Trump by President Obama, and we have evidence of this. Remember, President Obama has been blamed for Hurricane Katrina, 9/11. These are events that happened before he was president. It even happened at Donald Trump rallies where people were blaming President Obama for how he handled 9/11, seemingly clueless that President Obama was not president when 9/11 happened. I did have one idea of how we might be able to get Trump to pay attention to the daily intelligence briefings. Do them on Saturday Night Live, because Trump seems to be watching that regularly, or maybe having like an Eastern European model working in the U.S. before being authorized to, presenting him the briefings. Those are two ideas I have.
And apparently the intelligence community is trying to come up with a way to make this information more interesting to him.
Yeah, and I guess from what we learned from a number of people who have interviewed Trump, if you're having a conversation with Trump and there's a TV on in the background, Trump will pay a ton of attention to that TV. So maybe the people who brief Trump can come into his office, but then just play the briefing on a TV in the background or something like that. Trump's probably more likely to start getting intelligence briefings daily when the intelligence agencies are staffed exclusively with people smart enough to only tell Trump what he wants to hear. Maybe Ted Nugent as the future FBI director or something like that. At least Bush 43 was receiving his intel briefings. I mean, yes, he ignored one particular one called Osama bin Laden determined to strike within the U.S., but he was at least getting them, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, God forbid some sort of attack did happen. You would like to at least look back and take solace in the fact that you did everything you could to prevent it.
And if you're not taking every briefing that is offered, how could you possibly feel like you did everything you could and knew everything that you could have known? This is a systemic and fundamental danger. I know we like to joke around about it, but this is truly scary stuff. Earlier this week, MSNBC did something interesting. They did a town hall called Trump Country in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Chris Hayes was the host of it, and they had Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders attend. Now, before I even tell you the story, if you're watching with me, this expression on Bernie Sanders' face that you see in the picture that we're displaying, this expression tells you everything you need to know about how this thing went. And I'm going to start with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders calmly walking a Trump voter through how Republicans are planning to gut the social safety net. This Trump voter insisted that no one's listening to small town voters like her and actually started saying, we're paying into all of these things and I'm concerned that we're paying in and we're not getting out what we should be getting out. And this applies to taxes and social welfare, et cetera, which is actually sort of a progressive idea in many ways. Let's start with this, and you will see how she doesn't even realize, as Bernie Sanders astutely explains to her, if these are your views, you voted for the guy who doesn't agree with what you are saying. Bernie Sanders explains it very, very clearly to her, and she agrees with Bernie, but you can tell she doesn't really get that she voted against her own best interest by voting for Trump. Take a look at this.
Okay, but now here's good point. Let's see if we can go forward on this. I am assuming that you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that we should not cut Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. Is that correct or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it shouldn't be cut.
Okay. Right. Do you know who is now working very hard to try to do that? Republicans in Congress have a plan under the guise of saving Medicare and saving Social Security, making devastating cuts. That's what Republicans are now trying to do. The other point that you made, which is I think you made it, or both of you have made it actually, is who's going to pay for this stuff? And that is a very fair point. What all of us should know is that over the last 25 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country from you to the top 1/10 of 1%. In other words, the middle class has shrunk and trillions of dollars have gone to the top 1/10 of 1%. Do you think it's inappropriate to ask those people to start paying their fair share of taxes so we can adequately fund Medicaid and making public colleges and universities tuition free? Is that an unfair thing to ask?
I don't think it's an unfair thing to ask. The 1%ers, they got rich off us.
That's right.
So it's time they put back.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Bernie Sanders visibly perplexed. That's just the best, isn't it? She still has no idea that she voted for the wrong person based on what she wants to see happen.
Yeah, it upsets me in a way because this guy would have beaten Trump. I'm pretty sure of that. The people wanted a populist. They didn't want some hack like Hillary Clinton.
Here's one other great moment where they are all saying that we can ignore all the crazy stuff Trump said during the campaign because it wasn't true. And Bernie Sanders points out, you're defending Trump by saying we should have all just understood he was lying during the campaign. It's an amazing moment. Take a look.
There's no question to my mind, and I find it interesting that what 3 out of 4 of you are saying is, yeah, he talked about that stuff, but it'll never happen. We don't believe that it will ever happen. Why do you vote for somebody who, in a sense, then is lying?
He started a dialogue with the American people, and he used the media to get his point across. And but he wasn't lying. He started the dialogue. He voiced his opinion, and he got feedback, and he addressed it as he went along. He knows as well as anybody in this room, you can't go after a group of people because of religious beliefs. It's never, and I knew that right off the bat. But he was still up front, and he talked to the public.
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, what you're saying is that you think, and I think, that what he was talking about was unconstitutional. Yet you got a candidate for president of the United States talking about grossly unconstitutional things. And wins an election.
Well, look what our Congress does. They pass unconstitutional laws every day.
Watching this did make me realize, Pat, that these people cannot be taught. You can't make individuals that are this committed to nonsense understand. There is no argument to be made. We just need to outnumber them through voter turnout. If we want to figure out how to win elections as progressives, having conversations with folks like this and trying to change their minds, it's not going to be nearly as effective as just go vote.
And Bernie's logic on these things always gets portrayed as pie in the sky. It's very straightforward and took this woman only a minute or so to be persuaded.
It took her only a minute to be persuaded that she agreed with Bernie. Yeah. But I think what's missing is the connection that, oh, maybe she should have voted for someone else because the person she voted for wants the opposite of what she just said makes sense. That's the missing piece, though.
And you should vote for someone who actually believes in what they say.
Yeah, well, that's, wow, Pat, that seems like a really crazy thing. We have a voicemail number. It's 219-2-DAVID-P. I don't know if this is the first voicemail exclusively focused on Pat. Maybe it is.
I think so.
Okay, let's take a listen.
Man, Pat has been on fire lately. Every video I see, he's out there making good points, and he's really become more confident since he first started the show. Keep up the good work.
All right, Pat, we have a positive Pat voicemail now, and I'm sure you have to be prepared that there will be now, in response, negative Pat voicemails, but that's okay.
I am prepared. I mean, there are growing pains, and I think I'm getting through them.
All right, on the bonus show today, we will hear about Pat's jury duty yesterday. Pat was out yesterday because of jury duty. Also, former producer Lewis is calling in from, I believe he's in Florida, although he may have moved into Georgia now. He's on an exploratory mission to the southeast of the United States. We're going to be talking to him extensively, big league, on today's bonus show. So if you're not a member, sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can use coupon code IVoted17 to get a discount. And please, 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 please donate at davidpakman.com/donate. We have a major Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, and I would love for you to be a part of it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.